From a prostitute and a bar owner to a Catholic nun. That is the simple backstory of Credonia Mwerinde, the woman who, together with other leaders of her cult in Uganda, murdered over 1,000 people back in the year 2000 after scamming them of all their property. This is the Inset edition. My name is Yusuf, and on today's episode of Criminal Diaries, we are going to look into the shocking story of Credonia Mwerinde, the Catholic nun who played the biggest role in the Kanungu mass murders, where over 1,000 people were killed. The 17th of March 2000 was just a normal day for the residents of Kanungu district in Uganda. As they were going about their business, suddenly, a huge explosion was heard coming from the headquarters of a cult which went by the name Movement of the Restoration of the Ten Commandments of God. The villagers of Kanungu rushed to the scene, but they arrived there too late. They found the exploded building gutted in an intense fire that killed all the people who were in it. Shockingly, they discovered that the windows and doors of this building had been boarded up to prevent anyone from escaping the fire. The now fully burnt-up building was a church named the Ark, and the people who were burnt inside were the members of the Movement of the Restoration of the Ten Commandments of God, a cult that had gained a lot of fame in Uganda by then. Shortly afterwards, the Ugandan police arrived at the scene and started removing the bodies of the victims outside from the now fully burnt-out remains of the church. When they counted the bodies, they found out that it was a total of 530 victims who had been burnt alive in the church. The first day's conclusion from the police was that this was a mass suicide where cult members ended their lives after being instructed to do so by their leaders. Although almost everyone accepted that conclusion, the fact that the doors and windows of the church had been boarded up to prevent people from escaping clearly indicated the possibility of foul play. And while clinging on to this suspicion, the police started to investigate all properties that had been owned by the movement and its leaders. And through this exercise, hundreds of bodies were discovered buried in mass graves at sites across southern Uganda. 6 bodies were discovered sealed in a latrine in the same compound where the church had exploded. 153 bodies were also discovered at a compound in Buhanga. At Dominic Kataribabu's house at Rugazi, 155 bodies were discovered. At Joseph Nyamurinda's farm, 81 bodies were found. The police stated that these people had been murdered in the earlier weeks and months before the church inferno, and after the autopsy was done, it was discovered that most of them had been poisoned, some stabbed, and others were hacked to death. The Ugandan police was under-equipped and outnumbered for the task of exhuming the bodies, thus the use of manpower from prisoners. After weeks of investigations and exhuming of bodies from various sites, the Ugandan government suspended the search for more bodies. At the time, the total number of victims were 924, although it is highly believed that if the search had not been suspended, a few more hundreds or even thousands of victims' bodies will have been discovered. The police, who had ruled out the suspicion of the incident being a mass suicide, started to investigate it as a mass murder case. From the investigations and interviews that were conducted, the police concluded that the leaders of the cult had murdered their members after a prophecy that had been the key recruitment point failed to occur, which led to the revolution of most members. So, what was this prophecy that was powerful enough to lure over 1,000 people to their untimely deaths? Movement of the Restoration of the Ten Commandments of God was a Christian religious movement, or you can call it a cult, that was founded by Credonia Mwerinde and Joseph Kibutere in the southwestern part of Uganda. Credonia Mwerinde is described as a very violent, materialistic, former bar owner and prostitute who found Catholicism after her bar in Kanungu went bust in 1989. Shortly afterwards, she claimed to have had visions of the Virgin Mary in a cave. She used the claims of the visions to lure Joseph Kibutere into forming a cult with her. Many Ugandans joined into the cult, as it seemed like the leaders were in direct communication with God himself. Unlike Credonia Mwerinde, Joseph Kibutere was a long-time clergyman. Born in the year 1932, he came up through the local Catholic school, and sources say he clung up to his faith as the compass that will guide him and everyone around him down the righteous path. Later on, he became a head teacher and coincidentally got posted at his own primary school. All the students who had been under him stated that Kibutere was a godly man who frequented the church and often tended to the sick. Joseph Kibutere's wealth and stature grew when he was made the supervisor for the region's Catholic schools. Kibutere founded a private school of his own at that time. In the year 1960, he married Teresa Kibutere, who bore him 16 children throughout the years of their marriage. The perfect record of Joseph Kibutere got soiled after 3 women approached him at a service one day in the year 1989. The 3, Credonia Mwerinde, Ursula Komuhangi, and Angela Mugisha, were members of a Christian cult devoted to Virgin Mary, whom they said had revealed to them that he, Joseph Kibutere, will take them in and help them to spread her message. Kibutere, who claimed to have had visions of the Virgin Mary earlier on, accepted the woman into his compound, and that was the beginning of the destructive cult. The primary leaders of the cult were Credonia Mwerinde, Dominic Kataribabo, Joseph Kibutere, Joseph Kasapurari, and John Kamagara. The mission of the movement was to bring people who, according to them, had gone astray to come back and live according to the 10 commandments of God, and they were to warn those who refused to join them that God was so angry with them to a point which he will send an apocalypse on the 31st of December 1999, and those who were still not living according to his commandments will die, while those who believed and followed the cult will be saved. The years that followed saw the cult grow so big in membership and popularity. They had grown into a thriving community which sat in pineapple and banana plantations. After being ordered out of Rwashamaire by village elders in 1992, the group moved to Kanungu district and settled on an extensive land that was owned by Credonia Mwerinde's father. Years later, according to a filing with the government in 1997, the cult's membership was listed at nearly 5,000 people. What is strange is that, despite the cult's extremist practices and rules, many people still joined in. I mean, as a member of the cult, one was discouraged from talking. The communication was only conducted through sign language. Sex was banned even for the married. The use of soap was discouraged, and fasting was conducted regularly. Members were allowed only one meal on Fridays and Mondays. Before joining the cult, one was required to sell all their worldly possession and give the proceeds to the leaders of the cult, and afterwards leave their families and go stay in Kanungu, where the cult had established its headquarters. Parents and kids were separated. Severe punishment was given to the members who disobeyed. The cult leaders demanded an undoubtful belief in the fairy tales that they were feeding the members, and anyone who showed any doubt or even dared to question anything was dealt with. Skipping forward to the last week of December 1999, members of the cult were hyperactive. Their leaders had urged them to confess their sins and get rid of any worldly possession they still had, in preparation for the end of the present times. So clothes and livestock were sold cheaply, work in the fields ceased, and even past members were re-recruited. Imagine how shocked the cult members must have been after waking up on the 1st of January 2000 and the world, which was supposed to have ended, was not just still there, they were in it as well. Yep, the apocalypse did not happen. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here narrating this story to you. It was maybe after touching each other and their surroundings that the members realized that they were not in a dream. They had been duped all their wealth by the same people who they had so much faith and respect in. Surprisingly, all the leaders of the cult Joseph Kibotere and the rest were still around, and after the members found this out, they faced them and started asking them where they would live, since they had sold everything they had possessed, including their lands. They demanded for a refund now that the world didn't end. Credonia Mwerinde and the other leaders quickly hatched a plan to get rid of their members now that they had already stolen everything from them and they were no longer of use. A meeting of all members was called, and this time around, to regain their trust, the leaders made up some story of how the world was stubborn and had refused to end. But the Virgin Mary had revealed to them that the new date for the apocalypse was the 17th of March 2000. On several days and months leading to the said date, most members who had requested for refunds and raised doubtful questions started to disappear mysteriously. March 2000 finally came, and activities at the headquarters started to rise again. On the 15th of March, the cult had organized a very huge ceremony, and strange enough, the leaders invited government officials for another party that was supposed to be on the 18th of the same month. Mind you, the 18th was a day after 530 members of the cult were set ablaze in a church, so that invitation was just a way to cheat the authorities into thinking that everything was normal. When the 17th of March finally came, the cult members, who had been told that the Virgin Mary herself will come take them to heaven from a makeshift church which was called the Ark, like Noah's Ark, they converged in there like flocks of sheep, broad smiles on their faces. It's happening. It's finally happening, they might have cheerfully screamed. Before long after the last cult member got in, the door of the church was closed and fully boarded so that no one would dare leave and miss this magnificent journey. A huge explosion went off, bringing the whole church to flames. The occupants tried to leave, but the doors and windows were strongly boarded. They all painfully burnt to death. The heaven that they were promised turned to hell on earth. So, just like that, Credonia Mwerinde, with the help of Joseph Kibotere, sold people fake promises, stole all their property, poisoned some, strangled some, and burnt the remaining to death. And up to date, their whereabouts and even the whereabouts of the other cult leaders remain a mystery.